Okay.
Okay.
All right, Danny.
Yeah, we should.
Okay, we're on your test 19. Shlishi min haTorah l'chsiv v'habasar asher yiga b'chol tamei lo yachel. So meat that had touched the rishon became a sheni, and if it touched something else, it makes it tamei. So we see clearly from the pasuk that shlishi exists by truma, because milo askina denaga b'sheni. We're clearly talking about a case where the basar was a sheni, and it touched truma, which made it a shlishi. Revi, we learned it from the Kal Vachomer from Tvul Yom, like we learned yesterday. Remember we said Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because if we say he holds like Rabbi Akiva, Nisni Nami Revi Betruma Chamishi B'Kodesh. If Midaraisa we see Truma makes Shlishi, and down to Hegdish goes Revi, then with the Kal Vachomer, you would go down to Revi with Truma and Chamishi B'Kodesh. We don't do that. Ella, so it must be that Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva lo yisravak Rabbi Yossi minaman. Where do you see Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like Rabbi Yossi? Amar lei, to lo lishtami Tana. There is no Tana at all in Shas. The listening Revi B'Truma Chamishi B'Kodesh. The name Rabbi Akiva. Obviously, from the absence of a Tanaitic statement to that respect, we see clearly that Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold to this Kal Vachomer from Tvul Yom that Rabbi Yossi is teaching. Right? Because we're not going to all of a sudden say that it exists if we don't hear a statement about it. Novik Rav Ashi, the Itemer of Kahana, Dak V'Ashkech. We're going to see, rather than just from the absence of a Tanaitic statement, we want to see something more beferush in the name of Rabbi Akiva, that he holds that Hegdish only goes down to Revi and not to a Chamishi. This not. Hakli mitzaref is mashu b'sochel HaKodesh. The din is if you have a long, Rashi says a long trough. On one end of the trough is a piece of Hegdish meat, and the other end of the trough is also a piece of Hegdish meat. They're not touching. The two pieces of meat are not touching. They're in fact on the opposite sides. If somebody whose tummy touches a piece of meat on one side of the trough, everything in the kli becomes tummy, because the kli is mitzarefit. But that din is only hegdish, and that's only midrabon.
What's in the trough? Is there mime in the trough?
No. The kli, you have a long 6-foot kli. You have hegdish meat on one side of it, hegdish meat on the other side of it. They're not touching. A tomei person touches one piece of the meat on one side, everything in the kli becomes tomei. That's a special din of kli being mitzaref, everything inside to become tomei. The kli
if it would be mayim, it wouldn't happen, right?
No, mayim. If the whole thing is full of mayim and a sheretz falls on the mayim, of course, that's the chiddush is that it's not mayim. The chiddush is we have something solid that is 10 feet apart that are not touching. Obviously, if you have two pieces of meat that are touching, and you touch one piece of meat and that other meat is touching it, you don't need this din of kli being mitzaref because. Oichel cannot be metame oichel. So, but the kli is mitzaref, the two pieces, even though they're not touching.
Ernie, isn't this a similar case to a person whose tummy who sits on a bed and there are 10 mattresses?
Yes,
everything.
It's not this. It's you're bringing up a chumrah that we see, which is similar. That means. A person, Mario was saying, a person sits on 10 mattresses. He sits on the top mattress. All the mattresses that he sits on, even though he's not touching them, because that's called mishka v'moishav. That's by a zah.
It seems to be the same din of a kli. It goes all the way through, and it
I would say the din of a kli No, the din of a moisha, for example, let's say you have a sofa and the zav sits on the sofa. Even a pillow on the other side of the sofa becomes tummy. Everything that he sits on, even if he sits on one part of it, but that's not a kli being mitzarefid. It's called anything that's sitting on the sofa with him becomes tummy. Here, the kli is mitzarefid. The kli sort of joins it together as if it's all one. But that's only b'kodesh of a lola truma. V'haravi b'kodesh posel v'ashlishi b'truma. Ravi, the hegdish becomes invalidated, and that's called posel because it doesn't convey the tumah further. And the truma becomes a shlishi. Amrav Chebarav Amrav Yechnon me'idusa shol Kiva nishnes mismiju. Through the testimony of Rabbi Akiva, we learn the following mishnah: the Tanya. Hoisif Rabbi Akiva, hasoiles, flour, v'aktoires, the spice, the incense, v'avoina, which is the spice, v'agecholi, the coals. Now, obviously, we're dealing with some of the things that are not edible. Shem noga tvul yom b'miksason, even if a tvul yom only touched part of it, posel is kula. The tum of the tvul yom is conveyed. So, for example, a bunch of flour is a bunch of particles, one next to each other. So you could make an argument that if the tvul yom only touches one particle, it doesn't convey to the next particle. Rabbi Akiva said, no, these things will all become tummy even though they're particulate. But revi posal, which means revi in chamishi lo, shlishi in by truma revi lo, al maksovar siruf dirabon. This concept, where we're saying that anything in a kli is mitzarif l'tuma, is rabbinic. Upligid Rab Chanin, but that's a machlokas of Rab Chanin. The Omar siruf doraisa. He says the din that anything in a kli that somebody touches, everything in that kli becomes tamei, is not tamei rabbinically, but rather tamei midoraisa. Shnei Amar, by the korbanos of the Nesiim, by the Miluim. It says kafachas, 1 spoon, asara zahav meleak torres. Hakosuv asa komasher bakaf achas. It unifies everything in the spoon. And this is the din midoraisa, says Rav Chanin, of the klis being mitzarif everything l'tumah. Tanan also, we learn in the Mishnah, al machas shenimsis babasa. You have a needle that's sitting in a piece of meat. Shasakin v'hayadayim tahoros. And a knife and a person's hands touched this needle. The knife and your hands remain tohor, but the basar is tamei. We'll see in a minute where this needle came from, and we'll see why the knife and your yadayim remain tohor. Now that's if you found the needle in the meat. Ninsas baperesh. Let's say the needle was found among the intestinal contents in the stomach. Then hakol tohor. We'll see in a minute because the excrement of the animal cannot be metame the meat of the animal. On Rabbi Akiva. Zachinu shein tumas yadayim b'mikdash. It's to our benefit. Chazal made a takana because human hands move around and touch different parts of the body. And you may have touched something that was moist, and then you touched truma or hegdish, and it became disgusting. So the rabbis instituted that your hands have a level of a sheni. So it can be metame hegdish to be a shlishi, and it can passel truma. That's a gzeira midrabanan on our hands. But Rabbi Akiva says that this Tumas Yadayim was not Nigzar in the base of Mikdash. Otherwise, we would have had a problem because everything that we touched would have become tummy. So, Freit the Gemara, V'nema she'ein Tumas Yadayim v'kelim b'Mikdash. Why not say simply that there's no Tumas Yadayim and no Tumas Kelim, right? That fluids cannot be Matame Kelim, even with Rabbanon, in the Mikdash. Yadayim koidim gzeres Kelim nishnu. Shlomo HaMelech, say the Rishonim, was the one who instituted the Tumah on Yadayim. So this was way before, only in the time of Hillel and Shammai, were they goyzer on Kelim. That there should be a rabbinic Tumah on Kelim that were touched by Tomidika liquids. Because normally, only an Avatuma, like a sheretz, a piece of nevela, of course, Tumas Meis can be Metame, Odom, and Kelim. Oichel and Mashkin normally are not Metame, Kelim. However, Chazal eventually instituted a rabbinic Tumah on Kelim that were touched by liquids. But that came after the Gzeira on Yadayim.
Oh, there's a difference between Yadayim and the body. If a coin comes in, that's
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is not a Tumas Haguf of your whole body. That means they're Metame, just your Yadayim. If you touch with your shoulder, it doesn't become tummy. Only your Yadayim, because your Yadayim are Askonios Hey. So at night, you're touching yourself here, there, whatever. So they made the Gzeira just on the Yadayim, not on the rest of your body. Absolutely. Amar, how can you say that Yadayim kodim gzeres kelim nishnu v'hatarvayim bo bayom gazru? The bo bayom refers to a day in the attic of Hananiah ben Chizkiah ben Goron, who there were 18 halachas that were paskin like Beis Shammai, because at that time in the attic they counted and there were more Beis Shammai nicks and Beis Hillel nicks, so they quickly locked the door. They voted, and these 18 takanas were passed. So Tarvayu Babayom Gazru. So how can you tell me that one came before the other? Disnan has sefer the halacha that Kisvei HaKodesh conveyed tumah, because people would store their Kisvei HaKodesh with true, like they knew Kisvei HaKodesh were holy, they knew Truma was holy. So they would have a certain box called the holy box, and they would store their Truma and their Megillas Esther and the other Kisvei HaKodesh that they had in the same box. Well, mice would come because they smelled the Truma and would make holes in the Megillah. So they made a Tumah on Svarim, so you wouldn't keep them next to your Truma. A Sefer V'Hayadayim, which is what we learned, regular hands, if they touched Truma without Natilas Yadayim, would passel them, because hands were made a sheni. That's why we do our Natilas Yadayim, it's based on that. The Hatvul Yom, when a Tvul Yom touches Truma, it also passels it, right? A Tvul Yom can eat Meiser. And before this Gzeira, they could also eat Truma. But they made an extra Tumah that a Tvul Yom also cannot touch Truma. And food in Kelim that were nitmu b'mashkin. So you see, this Mishnah lists Yadayim and the fact that mashkim are matame Kelim in the same Mishnah. So how can you tell me Yadayim kodim gzeres Kelim nishnu? They were done at the same time. Elo Amar Rava, Hanach l'tumas sakin. First of all, let's deal with the fact that the knife remains tohor. Because right, let's say you use a knife to cut the piece of meat that has the machat in it. So that's not a problem. The knife will not become metame no matter what is involved, whether it's chulin or truma or kochim or anything, because truma is not going to be able to metame kelim. Because high sakin denoga b'mai. What did the knife touch? So the knife has two alternatives. It could have touched the meat, but meat's not a problem. Food is not metame kli. So what? When you cut the piece of meat, it touched the needle. So the knife is not a problem. Now, this machat that we said if you touch the needle, you're tame. Well, where did the needle come from? Name a sofek machat, meaning it's a needle that we don't know what its status is. Did somebody tame touch it or not? So it's sofek tuma. Well, then it's not a problem. So whenever you found spittle in Yerushalayim, so maybe we should be geyser because it's the spittle of a zav or a nida, which is avatuma, which would be tamin adam. So they were not geyser on Suffolk Roik Shib Yerushalayim. And let's say you see a kli lying around. We don't know what the status of it. So the din is in Yerushalayim, we're lenient. And therefore, the machat, either way, why is it tameh? So
Suffolk to Rabim, whether in Yerushalayim or Chutz.
We're not there yet. There's something else that we'll deal with. We know that somebody had been with a corpse and it had touched a corpse, and somebody had lost such a needle. And this needle was identified by Kira Babos. It must have had some special marks on it because you know what? That needle was a Tommy Mace needle. So then that's why if you touched the needle, you became Tommy. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Avinu Amar, or this cow that you ended up shechting was muzzled before it got to Yerushalayim. So it didn't need anything in Yerushalayim, and it came from Chutz Yerushalayim. So since the needle was swallowed or somehow absorbed into the goof of the body from outside Yerushalayim, then we have to worry that it's tummy. So we have two svaras as to why it's tummy. Okay, gufa. Let's analyze this more in depth. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina. They weren't geyser on possible spittle in Jerusalem. Roikim Tanina, Kalim Tanina. We have them both in the Baraisa. Roikim Tanina this not. All spit you find on the ground is considered tohor. Chutz mishal shuka elyon, except for the upper marketplace. There were a lot of goyim. The Rambam learns, and goyim's spit is considered tamei. The Romans must have hung around there. So the Gemara says, why do I need a statement? We have a Beferishtika Mishnah. Why did I have to be told twice? Lo tzricha, it's a chiddush. Because Afagat is chazik zav. Because, for example, let's say we know that there's a whole bunch of zavim here in Yerushalayim. Still, we're not goyzer on Tumas Roik Sheb Yerushalayim. That's a special leniency. And then, why do I need a statement? We have Kalim Tanina. It's not called Kalim and it's on Yerushalayim. You find vessels in Jerusalem. Now, there was a pathway down to the mikveh. So let's say you find a bunch of forks or spoons, derech yerida l'beis hatvila, on the way down to the mikveh. So then those kelim are tmeim, because we have to assume that people were carrying their tomadik kelim down to the mikveh and they dropped it. But anywhere else, had the alma tohir.
Why'd they have a different way of going back? You mean instead of coming up?
There was a derech aliyah and then everywhere else.
Yeah.
Now, ula tamech ema sefer. Okay, say the sefer derech aliyah tohir, but had the alma tmeim. Based on that diuk, we would say anywhere else except derech aliyah would be tamei. Ela reisha dafka. The reisha is a dafka case. It means that dafka, if you find it derech yerida. The sefer lav dafka, but the sefer is lav dafka. And what is it? Lafuke gaz yisa. Gaz yisa are what? Are small kalim? Oh, no, like little alleyways where the Sefer Lav Davka Lafuki Gazisa, to exclude these little alleyways, which is near the Beis HaTefillah. We're not sure if they're Derech Aliyah or Derech Yerida. Now, according to Rav, who explained that our case was a needle which we knew touched the Tamei Mace. Kivan do Amar Mar B'Chalal Cheret, right? There's a special din of the sword that who touched a dead body, that the metal piece becomes mamish like an avi avos atuma. Cherev hareu kechalal becomes an avi avos. So that maybe Adam v'keli nami l'tomei. So maybe because it came from such a severe type of tumah, it should be metami Adam and keli. Amar Avashi, this comes to what Elazar said. Zol Someres, Azara Rishus Arabim. It's still a suffix. And the Beis HaMikdash is considered a Rishus Arabim. And therefore, Havalei Sveik Tumah Rishus Arabim. They call suffix Tumah Rishus Arabim Sveiko Tohor. Since the whole din of suffix Tumah is learned from a Sota woman, which happens in the Rishus HaYachid, suffix Tumah Rishus Arabim is always Tohor.
Why is the Beis HaMikdash considered Rishus Harabim all the time?
Because I guess the whole Klal Yisrael gets to go there.
Yeah, but they weren't there all the time. They weren't 600,000 people.
No, but it's not always 100,000. That thing has to do with roads. How many people travel it? But there's other estratio, like a big plaza. The rule of 600,000 people who travel, that's regarding a road. But there's other gedorim regarding Rishus Harabim. I would think it's a svara that it's not hard to understand why the Beis HaMikdash, because on Pesach, Gans Klal Yisrael went into the Beis HaMikdash. On Yom Kippur, the whole Klal Yisrael went in there.
Yeah, but it's not Rov Hazman.
Yeah, but it's not. Doesn't Tiananmen Square? Just because people only gather there once a year, it still would be considered Rishus Harabim. Same thing. It's not that it has to be there every. You're on the road. A road is considered a Rishus Harabim if you have 600,000 people traveling there every day. But there's other gedorim in terms of what a Rishus Harabim is, like a big plaza and like a central square of a city would also be considered Rishus Harabim. So therefore, the Gemara clearly says that the Beis HaMikdash is considered a Rishus Harabim regarding this. So the Gemara says, "Harbishus hayachid sveiko tamehu." So michne, the Gemara still doesn't understand. Even b'shus hayachid, the suffix would not be tummy because hay machat davar she'ein bo das lishoyelhu. The needle doesn't have das. You can't ask the needle, "Where were you?" V'chol davar she'ein bo das lishoyel bein b'shus harabim bein b'shus hayachid sveiko tohor. So it's another din in Sveik Tumah, that if it's an inanimate object that doesn't have das, then it's not Tomei, even in Rosh Hashanah. So why in Rosh Hashanah would it be Tomei? For a different reason. Mishum Davi Sveik Tumah Haba B'dei Adam. It's a suffix Tumah that an Adam is asuk with a needle, and it has a certain qualification because v'am Rav Yochanan suffix Tumah Haba B'dei Adam nishalin aleh. You can ask a chacham, but it has a din of Tumah v'tahara. If human beings are occupied in using these items on a regular basis, then it's excluded from that exclusion of davar she'ein bo das lishon. We'll go into that a little bit more detail tomorrow. So tomorrow we will